There are very few things in this world that have caused as much damage to friendships as the Mario Kart series, and of all the tracks across all of the games, I'd be willing to say none have caused quite as much pain and sorrow as Rainbow Road. Over the years, the track has evolved from thwomps in space, to a rainbow in space, to a space station in space, and Rainbow Road's music has changed just as much in the 26 years since the original came in and started ruining relationships. But the more things change, the more they stay the same, and looking at Rainbow Road over the years gives us an interesting look into how different composers handled this karting classic. So without further ado, let's dive into the musical evolution of Rainbow Road. The first incarnation of Rainbow Road can be found in Super Mario Kart for the SNES. The stage's music is a 16-bit funk tune based off of the simple C13 sus to C13 vamp. Note the more open bass line, which plays around with the root, fifth, and octave, as well as using this typical funk bass line thing where you overshoot and hit the second of the chord before resolving down to the root. This tune is great, but it's not until after the main melody that we see some foreshadowing for future installments. This 8-bar transition between the A and the B sections gives us two of what I'm going to call our main motifs that we'll see evolve throughout the series. First, Motif 1, which is this rising triad figure over a tonic pedaled bass. This is an example of chromatic parallelism or planing, where a voicing stays intervallically consistent as it moves around different root notes, even if that consistency takes some of the notes inside the chords outside of the home key of the piece. In this first example, the parallelism is sacrificed for making the first and last chords more colorful, adding the major seventh to the C chord and the second to this F chord, but we'll see more authentic examples of planing in later installments. Motif 2 is the melodic figure that we see here, specifically this big open 5-1-5 leap in the first bar. The B section of this tune is based off of this motif, transposing it down a fifth and harmonizing it with these lush 4-part synth harmonies. More important than this full melody is the idea of basing a melody around the root and fifth of the key. These wide leaps to such stable chord tones gives the melody a big, bold quality, which you can see used to evoke a feeling of adventure in a lot of Zelda music. We'll see this idea in particular evolve as the series goes on. This iteration of Rainbow Road is great, but it's not the one that everybody thinks of when they think of Rainbow Road music. That would be our next example in the series from Mario Kart 64. At first glance, this example hardly has anything in common at all with its predecessor. The vibe is completely different, the open rhythmic bass line is traded in for the static chugging one, and the funky, silly dominant chords are traded in for more dramatic sounding triadic chord voicings. Despite all of this, if we look closely, both tunes do start in the same way, a 2-chord 1 sus to 1 vamp. The way that the same harmonic idea is used so differently speaks to the difference in attitudes towards these two tunes. We also see our second main motif, the fifth-based melody, come into play. It's not quite a direct reference to the original title, but the A section melody is based on this leap from root to fifth, and the subsequent walk down from fifth back to root. Before I play it for you though, I want to draw attention to the last main motif we'll be looking at throughout the series. Motif 3 is this extended 1-flat-7-1 chord progression. Note the use of sustained notes inside each chord, maintaining interest even with the slow-moving harmony. Next, listen to the B section of this tune and notice a couple of things. First, this melody is based off of the same 5-1 walkdown that we saw in the opening phrase of the A section, only this time in our new key of A major. Next, check out this stanky F over E chord at the end. This acts simultaneously as the flat 6 in our bridge key and the flat 2 of our original key, bridging the gap as both a deceptive cadence in A major and a chromatic approach to our original tonic of E major. Okay, enough about Mario Kart 64. Moving ahead 4 years, we get Mario Kart Super Circuit for the Game Boy Advance. I personally think this is the weakest of all the Rainbow Road music, but we do see a pretty direct reference to our Motif 1 that was introduced on the SNES. This intro starts with the same 1, 2, flat 3, 4, add 2 progression, only this time the tonic pedal only extends as far as the 2 chord. We also see the same 1, flat 7, 1 progression that I dubbed Motif 3, although this time it's much quicker and funkier than in Mario Kart 64. Moving on to the GameCube brings us Mario Kart Double Dash, which in turn brings a Rainbow Road track that owes a lot to the N64 version both visually and musically. We open with a direct reference again to Motif 1, which it seems has solidified itself as the go-to opening for Rainbow Road tracks at this point. This time, though, we have no tonic pedal and the F add 2 chord from the original is rearranged as an F over G chord to give a stronger transition into the main melody. After this, we see some influence from Mario Kart 64 in the overall tone of the piece, as well as with the use of Motif 3, the extended 1, flat 7, 1 chord progression. There is one more subtle reference to Mario Kart 64's Rainbow Road. I'll go ahead and play it, and you see if you can catch it. Okay, so the thing about this direct quote from Mario Kart 64 is that it's written in the original key of this piece, C major, whereas the original modulated to the 4 of its original key. This means that this final stanky chord is even stankier. Instead of smoothly approaching the tonic as a flat 2 to 1 move, we get this raunchy flat 6 major over its major 7th that just sort of jumps to our 1 chord at the end. Mario Kart DS gives us a funky rendition of the established intro with a slight variation. We have the tonic pedal this time, but just like in Double Dash, the 4 chord at the end is reformed as a 5 sus chord. The melody provides an interesting blend of influence from the first 2 Mario Kart games, with this open, funky bass line clearly inspired by the SNES track, while the harmony gives us a slight variation on our main Motif 3. The B section showcases our main Motif 2 with this melody. This time, it's not just based on the idea of the open 5th, it can actually be seen as a rhythmically altered reinterpretation of the same melody that was used over Super Mario Kart's transition section. Mario Kart Wii opens with an interesting evolution of our main Motif 1. We start with a direct quote from the original version, with a 1, 2, flat 3, 4 move over a tonic pedal. But on the repetition, we get faked out, this time descending with a 1, flat 7, flat 6, 4, 5 move. I think this sounds extra shocking because our ears are expecting the second chord in the progression to move in a brighter direction, with this E over D implying a D Lydian sound from our D major bass. But instead we get a C over D implying at least a Mixolydian sound, moving a shade darker from D major. Mario Kart 7's Rainbow Road track also plays with our expectations of main motif 1, this time moving from the major 2 chord down to a major flat 2 chord, all over a tonic pedal in the Mario Kart 64 style chugging bass. The melody is also based on this 5-1 motif, which we can see as a direct evolution of our main motif 2. The B section takes after Double Dash's Rainbow Road track with a direct quote from Mario Kart 64's B section, staying in the original key of the piece, E. At the end, we see some real musical evolution as the final stanky chord problem that the lack of modulation in the bridge presents has been solved. This time, instead of the flat 6 major 7 in third inversion just jumping to our 1 chord, the final flat 6 chord kicks off a classic Mario cadence back to the top of the form. Our final and most recent example comes from Mario Kart 8, which hosts one of my favorite game soundtracks of all time. At this point, we've come a long way from the SNES era of gaming, and to me there's no clearer indication of that than the music of Mario Kart 8. So, let's take a look at what 22 years of evolution can do. First, main motif 1. Mario Kart 8's Rainbow Road uses Mario Kart Wii's variation of this motif as a transition between the bridge and the top of the form, with this 1 flat 7 flat 6 progression playing over a tonic bass pedal. Next, main motif 2. This time the influence is more subtle, but our melody is largely based off of elaborations of wide 4th and 5th leaps, mostly between the 5th and the tonic of the key. Finally, we do see some influence of our main motif 3. In the A section, each phrase opens with a 1 to flat 7 move, but this is slightly obscured by the tonic bass pedal and the way that the flat 7 chord doesn't resolve back to the 1 immediately after. It's always cool to see just how different the same musical ideas can sound in the hands of different composers and arrangers. Isolating these ideas from the specific context you hear them in can be super helpful for your own writing too. If you felt so inclined, you could try using these 3 main motifs, the chromatic planing over a tonic pedal, the melody centered around the root and 5th of the key, and an extended 1 flat 7-1 chord progression in your own writing. In fact, you kind of owe it to the musical lexicon to do so and share your interpretation with the world. So get on it. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can find me on Twitter at 8BitMusicTheory, and if you'd like to support this channel, you can check out my Patreon page here. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next one.